Welcome to part 2 of the series on Nazi policy. We're going to be looking today at how Nazi policy impacted the lives of women living in Germany in the 1930s. So part 1 of the series was the previous video, and that was how Nazi policy impacted the lives of workers. This is part 2 out of 4, which is about women. So you'll be using this if we're doing this during the time of COVID lockdown. You'll be doing it in your Nazi policy booklet that I emailed out to you. So either you've printed that booklet off and you're filling it in by hand, or you're doing it via Word, saving it so that when we do eventually get back into school, we can just print it off and you can pop it straight into your folder. Okay, so remember, there's going to be a 4-page spread at the start of your booklet. We've already filled in the workers section of that. We're going to be going back to that at the end of this session to fill in women. So skip a few pages until you get to the one that's subtitled Women. You should see a drawing of a woman and a propaganda poster that shows a woman. I was going to say with blonde hair, but you might not have a colour version. So turn to that page for me, please. We're going to be thinking about progress that women had made before Hitler and the Nazis came to power, and that's going to help us to understand a bit of context of what women's lives were like before, and it's going to help us to figure out how dramatically it had changed between the 1920s and the 1930s when Hitler and the Nazis were in power. So let's think about a 1920s German woman. Let's think about how she would have looked, what she would have worn, what jobs she would have had, education, and what was her life like, kind of just socialising and things like that. Now, if we were in school, I'd be giving you the textbook, and we'll be looking at page 51, but we're not, so hopefully I've scanned or taken a picture of it and I've emailed them out, put them on Instagram, or they're on the SharePoint for you. And you can also use your knowledge organiser as well. Okay, so it says use tables 5.1 on page 51 to draw an image of a 1920s woman in Germany and then label it with examples of progress that women had made in the 1920s. So I've done the drawing for you. Around the woman on your booklet, can you just do arrows coming out of her with progress that women have made according to the table at the top of page 51? Some of the things you can kind of work out yourself anyway. If you're looking at a typical 1920s woman, sometimes they were called flappers because of the dress that they wore. If you can see the lady in that drawing, she's got flaps of material at the bottom that make her skirt slightly shorter and make her skirt flap about when she's dancing. So they would have been dancing to jazz in the 1920s, which required a lot more energy when you danced. And she'd be moving around and her dress would be flapping from side to side. A lot of them would have tassels and things like that. It's like the classic 1920s flapper dress that we would probably put in our minds. So a flapper was much more carefree, risque, I should maybe say, type of woman than had been previously. So if you're thinking about 1910s, you're thinking about like Edwardian World War I type, still in a corset, long skirts type of woman. So if we think about progress, that means that she is making a lot of positive change in the 1920s. So pause here and label around either with your own knowledge or, like I said, using the table on page 51. So what I would have picked out was things like, let's start with her appearance. So she has short hair. That was the style at the time. She would have worn a lot of makeup, which wouldn't have been very usual before 1920s. Like we said, shorter, more risque dress. In terms of social progress, women are allowed to go out without a man with them and escorted. So what it would have been is if a woman was going out for dinner or drinks or to see a show, even to go for a walk around the park, very, very unusual for a woman to go on her own. If a woman went on her own, it usually meant that she had low morals and she was probably up to something dodgy. She had to have a man accompany her, or another woman. So usually it would be her husband, ideally, or her father, or her brother, or a cousin, or an acquaintance. And then, you know, if all else fails, you go out with your mum or your sister, especially if it's like for a walk or something. Very rarely was a woman allowed to go out alone. In the 1920s, not only is she allowed to go out alone, but she's allowed to go out to pubs and bars and speakeasies and dance halls. And in those places, she's allowed to smoke, she's allowed to drink, and she won't be judged for it. And then you could also say that the makeup and the dress is a part of that social progress. So if you wanted to be colour coding these, you could do a little colour code thing that says social, economic and political, and you could highlight on your booklet changes. So if you've said that she's allowed to go out on her own, that would be social because that's to do with her life, so you could highlight that. I've given it purple there, but you could choose your own colour. In terms of economic progress, so things to do with jobs and money, women are working a lot more in the 1920s. Their jobs are much more professional, so they'll be doing things like working in law, becoming doctors, teachers, civil service, which means, you know, working in some sort of way for the government. So those are much higher paid, more career jobs rather than kind of like the secretary, you know, kind of typing, those type of jobs. Very kind of looked down upon jobs in terms of you don't really need a lot of, you know, university or training or anything like that. In fact, women are starting to earn the same as men in 1920s Germany, especially if they work for the government. So add that and put that in whatever colour you're doing for economic. I find that very important because I was watching a documentary the other day on Netflix, and it said that in America, women are still paid. So if a man is paid like our version of a pound, women would be paid an hour or whatever. Women would be paid 74p in comparison, and that's in 2020 in America. This is 1920s Germany, and they're being paid equally, not for every job, but we still haven't got that today. So that's how progressive 1920s Germany is. So more women are in employment and their wage is pretty good. In terms of political progress, things to do with power, women over the age of 20 are given the vote. Again, very interesting and very important because 1928 is when women of that age in Britain are given the vote, whereas they already have the vote earlier than that, younger than that in the 1920s in Germany, so they're more equal to men. By 1933, 1/10 of the members of the Reichstag are female, so women are going into political roles and actually getting them, which is very important as well. So if you're looking at the economic progress and stuff, those are the things in the middle there that you should have put in green, or whatever colour you chose for economy, political in the colour, and social. Okay, so if you just want to even if you just wanted to pause that and make sure you've got all the labels down, then you can, otherwise I'm going to be moving on. So this is what progress looked like in the 1920s. Amazing, I think. Germany were ahead in Europe in terms of women being more equal to men. Obviously they weren't completely equal, but more equal to men. I think Germany in the 1920s for women was a very progressive country. I would have been relatively happy there. This is why, when Hitler takes over in 1933 and puts some policies in place, that progress is going to almost reverse, and they're going to go completely backwards in terms of what women are allowed to do, their jobs, their social life, and how they're allowed to look, and how much power they've got. So let's look into that now for the next part of today's session. The poster is in your booklet, but the other two sources aren't. I find these really interesting in showing you how women are being portrayed by the Nazis in the 1930s and how much influence that's having on people and how they treat women and see women, including women themselves. Now, we know the power of propaganda. We especially know how clever the Nazis are at using propaganda to make people kind of brainwash people and convince them. If you tell somebody something enough in a convincing way over and over and over, you know, even the most stubborn person will subtly, their brain will take it in and kind of think of it as the norm. So if you're being shown these type of things on a regular basis, what is it telling you that you should be as a woman? Let's look at the two written ones, and then I'll actually get you to pick apart the propaganda poster yourself because it's on the booklet. So source G is a speech from Goebbels himself. Remember, Joseph Goebbels is the head of propaganda in Germany, and he's giving a speech in 1929 saying how women should be. The mission of women is to be beautiful and to bring children into the world. Notice how it's positive, it's not forceful, but it's very clear that women should look good and women should be mothers. The female bird pretties herself for her mate and hatches eggs for him. In exchange, the male takes care of gathering the food and stands guard. So he's saying that nature teaches us that everybody has a gender role. Women look good and produce children. Men go out and have the job and take care of the family. I think using the bird metaphor there is a bit stupid because male birds are very pretty and they do weird dances, don't they, to attract mates, and the woman kind of just chooses and says, you'll do. And women birds never look very that pretty, so that's a bit of a dodgy metaphor to use there, but hey-ho. Okay. So this is kind of, like I said, very positive, very like, oh yeah, it makes sense, this is nature, I'm being called beautiful, I could fit into this role. Source H is a German nursery rhyme addressed to women. Take hold of the kettle, broom and pan, then you'll surely get a man. Shop and office, leave alone, your true work lies at home. So either this is a catchy tune that you'd be singing with your girlfriends, or it's something that you might sing to your children. So from a very, very young age, women are being told, you stay at home, you clean, and that's how you're going to get a man. Don't bother going into work because you should be a housewife. Okay, so in terms of the propaganda poster, this is a poster showing the ideal German woman according to the Nazis. The text reads, support the cause, mother and child. I want you to pick the symbols that you can find in here. Think about that drawing you had of the flapper and how different this woman is in the 1930s. So think about her hair, her makeup, her dress, as well as what she's doing, who she represents. You could even think about the background. You could even think about the slogan, support the cause. So there we go. Pause the clip here so you can label the propaganda poster with what you think an ideal woman should look like and act like according to the Nazis. Okay, so hopefully you've picked things like an ideal Nazi woman shouldn't wear makeup. She should have long hair, ideally blonde, because blonde hair, blue eyes is the typical pure Aryan German. Her hair is in a very traditional style, even though it's long. So traditional Bavarian German style is 2 long plaits, loose if you're a young girl. And then when you get married, you usually kind of get the plaits and you kind of twist them into 2 buns, kind of like Princess Leia, and you pin them. Or you'd have like a bun at the back like that lady there. So she's got traditional modest hairstyle. Wearing flat shoes, long dress. Obviously she's not going out, she's not drinking and smoking. Instead, she is breastfeeding, so she is being a mother and she's being a very nurturing, because that's kind of what the symbol of breastfeeding is, you know, the natural milk going to the child, just like, you know, all the animals do. It's natural, it shows that she's nurturing and she's caring. We just assume she's a housewife. I know it's not on the poster, but we can add that because of the previous sources that we've looked at. She's not working. Instead, the husband is working in the background there. You can see him farming. Long dress, I've said, haven't I? She should take no interest in politics and just be a wife and a mother and not go out to work. So make sure you've labelled all those around the poster. Okay, go to the next page and you can see a list of, I've got 5 on here, but there's 6 in the booklet. 6 questions. If you go and look at my scan or picture of page 52 and 3 of the textbook, you'll be able to answer those 6 questions, or your knowledge organiser. So pause the clip here, and you're going to read the information, and you're going to pick out 2 laws that the Nazis put in place to try and increase birth rates. So one of the things the Nazis wanted to do was to build up the German population, to make it stronger. But remember Hitler's 4-year plan. He wanted Germany to be ready to fight a war in 4 years. To fight a war, you need cannon fodder. You need people that you can spare, that if they die, it's okay. So the more people can have children, the better. These are the future soldiers they're breeding. So he puts 2 laws in place to encourage people to have children. So name the law and just give me a little description of what it involved. What was the Lebensborn program? Again, trying to create more children. How did Hitler reward women for being mothers? I could only really find one thing, although 2 may be a push. What are the 3 Ks that women should stick to? What changed that allowed women to return to work? What effect does this have? And I've also put, how is this negative or something for Hitler? So pause the clip here, and then on the next slide I'll go through the answers with you. Okay, number 1, 2 laws were the law for the encouragement of marriage, which is where a young couple were given a loan, given money by the government if they got married. Now for every child that they had, they got to keep 25% of that loan. If you had 4 children, then you never had to pay back that loan, because that would be 100%. So again, it's encouraging people to have 4 children, isn't it? In order to not have to pay back that money. So they'd be using that money to kind of buy a house and start a family. So very clever. There's no name for it, but another law was that you could get divorced if you couldn't have children. And that means that you can then go marry somebody else, and there's the potential for you to have children there. Whereas before, divorce wasn't really allowed. Number 2 was the Lebensborn program. This is the really creepy one. Lebensborn meant life springs, and it was a program where if you were an unmarried woman, you could still have a baby and not be looked down upon. That's because you were having a pure Aryan child. So especially if you were Aryan, and then you would get pregnant by an SS man, officer, soldier, who would obviously be Aryan and racially pure, and you would have the perfect pure baby. Some women took care of that baby, you know, even though they were single mums, and some got given some money as compensation. And the babies, most of the babies were kind of brought up in these kind of special homes, a bit like orphanages, I suppose, where they were kind of, you know, properly brainwashed into becoming pure Germans, superior Germans. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit of an odd, weird program. Number 3, how did Hitler reward women? So on his mother's birthday every year, he would give women in a big ceremony medals who had for those who'd had like large families. So I think it was like 6 or more children or something like that. I did kind of pick up that they're called heroes a lot in speeches, but really it's the medal thing. What are the 3 Ks? Kinderkultur, Kirche, which means children, kitchen, church. So obviously they're K in German, but they're not K to us. So have children, be a housewife, and go to church. Those are the 3 Ks that women should stick to. What changed that allowed women to return to work? Well, Hitler began to invade other countries in the late 30s, and that led to World War II in 1939. So men were needed as soldiers, which meant that women had to go and return to work to keep Germany going. But the problem was a lot of women liked their life. And had a lot of children at that point, couldn't just go back into work, especially when they were undervalued and underpaid. So it was really hard. They thought that when they allowed women, they'd all flock back to work, like freedom, but a lot of them like, well, no, we get equal rights, and I like the way things are at the moment, so no. So it wasn't, people did go back, but not in the numbers that Hitler wanted. So that'll probably be number 6. You're looking at the graph there and thinking about the number of workers that ended up coming back. Okay, so there you go, done with women. Go back to that page spread, fill in the box on women, make sure you're getting into the right box there. I think pick 3 policies to do with women. You can do more by all means, so you might want to pick like a mix, like things to do with work, marriage, you might want to do the Lebensborn, you might want to do the medals, you might want to do the not paying back the loan, there's lots of different things. You might want to do the Kinderkirche. How do these policies change women's lives? So things like a lot of women didn't have jobs anymore, a lot of women had lots of children. Did women feel good about themselves? Did they not? What was it like if you weren't married? And therefore, did their lives improve? Again, you can say yes, you can say no, you can say a little bit of both, as long as you give me what's the magic number? 2. 2 reasons why you think that. Okay, then that's that. That's women done. So that's this week's set of lessons done. If you're not using this to revise and you're using this to learn in the COVID epidemic, then please make sure you're doing the quiz on SharePoint on forms that tests you on workers and women. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you're all safe and well.